What to do: watch the video. Then after, complete the form attached in the description box. And wait for an email confirmation from compliance@uh4c.org.
Well, thank y'all all for being here. We're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to kind of give you the kind of kickoff tonight, and Kayla's going to have a good bit, and then Catherine and I'll both kind of come back at the end. We're going to talk about behavior management training. This is a serious topic, so we're going to open up a little bit lightheartedly. We could do, I was thinking before we started, how many of you know when it's appropriate to spank a foster child? When is it appropriate to spank a foster child? Never. Okay, so there's the class. So we're now done. You have behavior management certification.
Bye.
So one of the things we really did want to do tonight, and especially with videoing it and making it accessible, is not just say what not to do. And just say, okay, don't do these things now. Now go out from here. So just as a way of introduction, we have a little bit of fun.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. You two are going to learn to be more professional, Luke. That's what you're going to do, Luke.
So we may have all had that moment. Hopefully not at work. We wanted to go with a video that did not have children being spanked. But hopefully, listen, I'll be honest, I don't want to put him on the spot. I grew up getting spanked. We spanked in our house. We were a good old Southern house. When we went to spend summers with my grandmother, she was a switch user. I mean, you know, the story, you always hear those stories. I don't know if anybody else grew up with that. We had to go out and pick a switch. I mean, I remember doing that. I was always convinced my grandmother grew this one bush in her backyard specifically for switch picking. But we do come from a culture and a time where, you know, spanking, a lot of us might have grown up with that. But as we said there in the beginning, it's not acceptable with foster kids. But it's a deeper thing than that. And that's kind of what we're going to get to tonight, is talk about the whys and the ways we can use appropriate discipline, not punishment, with our foster kids. So I just share this with you. I share that just to get you a little lighthearted about it. But I shared this idea with you. When dealing with foster kids, we sort of keep two different ideas in our heads. On the one hand, we want to treat them like our kids. I mean, we want to care for them. We don't want them to be special or be different. I've told the story before when I've done trainings here that when I worked for DFAX, I was there about 15 years, I'll never forget dealing with a foster family where one of the rules in their house was real kids got ice cream. So at night they would have ice cream, and the real kids, their biological children, got ice cream and foster kids didn't. And while they never laid a hand on these kids, they, you know, plenty to eat except ice cream. You know, they had a roof. They never would have considered hitting them. That was a form of, really to me, abuse towards them. So we do want to consider these our kids. You know, we want to take care of them like our kids. But on the other side, we have to always remember they're not our kids. They're in the custody of the state, and there's a whole lot of rules and regulations around what we can do and we can't do. So that's what we want to talk about tonight, is how we deal with foster children. But also not just say, well, here's what not to do. Here's another list of things you can't do. But really talk about how we can engage with and care for children. Because all children need discipline. Adults need discipline. Again, hopefully that's not what your work is like. We try not to do that at work here. So, but the word I thought of was stewardship. You know, I grew up in church. When you heard about stewardship, somebody's talking about giving money. You know, the stewardship sermon. But to be a steward is to be a caretaker. To have something that's not yours, but you're charged with taking care of it. So I would just put that word out to you as we get going tonight, is to think of foster kids, while they're not our kids, but they are in our care. They've been temporarily trusted to our care to be stewards of them. And that is really what I just ask you to keep in mind as the foundation as we talk about discipline, behavior management, sort of things tonight, is these are children that for whatever length of time, whatever season, have been entrusted either to a foster home or to you on a Mother's Morning Out or a volunteer basis. These are children that we've been entrusted for caring for, and they come with a lot of special circumstances. We're going to talk about trauma, but we're stewards of them. We hold them in our hands for a short amount of time, and how do we best care for them, even in the times we need to discipline them or use behavior management techniques. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Caleb.
So I really do feel like this is the fun part, that I get to do the fun part, but it's also the really hard stuff. And I think anytime I talk or teach about trauma, I always want to just say, like, I realize that all of us have it. All of us have trauma that we're walking around with. It's different for everyone, but I think it's really important that you are aware of that. As we're talking about this, we're specifically talking about it in children, but we know that we all have it too. And so pay attention to yourself and do what you need to do to take care of yourself after we talk about trauma. So, what do you guys already know about trauma? There's so much, and you probably had training on trauma before, sometime in your life maybe. So what do you know? Like, what comes to mind when I say trauma? Just throw it out.
I have no background in that, so
Cool.
ground zero for me.
I love that.
Abuse.
Anything else pop up?
I said trauma, you think of something that sticks with you. Maybe the abuse is something that keeps having an effect on you.
Yeah, it's good.
It totally rewires behavior patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good. Cool. Well, I'm going to literally read the definition so that we all know exactly what it is. An event or series of events or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful, life-threatening, and that causes lasting adverse effects. So that is, whenever I think about that kind of definition, I think that's so broad. That could be almost anything. And that's kind of the truth, is that so many things can be traumatic. And something that's traumatic for Tom could not be traumatic to me. And something that's traumatic to Coley could not be traumatic to anyone else, you know? So it's really important that we kind of keep that in mind, that it's still significant and real if it was your trauma and not mine. I think sometimes we kind of forget that, or we think things aren't a big deal, so they shouldn't be a big deal to someone else. And just like what you were saying, it really does have such a huge impact on so many parts of life. When we have a traumatic experience, it affects the way that our brain functions. There's so much like brain science around trauma these days, and that's so cool to me, really because it just gives us an understanding. And one of the biggest things that trauma does is it creates this alarm system in our bodies and in our brains. So when a significant event happens that affects us in a way we're like, okay, that wasn't right, or that made me not feel good, or whatever, it kind of triggers a defense system in us. And then from that point forward, like Tom was saying, it impacts us and sticks with us so that we forever have that kind of like trigger. So I've seen many different examples of this. There's tons of different examples. One may be like if someone was sexually abused by a business person and he always had his briefcase with him. Every time they see a briefcase, their brain subconsciously triggers that, and they may feel the feelings they felt when they were abused, or they may just have the memories related to that, but it could all be subconscious. So maybe they just start to feel anxious, but they don't really even know why. I know for me, I used to work with a lot of trauma, and there was a significant event that happened when someone was eating a cucumber. So for me, the smell of cucumbers or whatever always remind me of that. So it's usually related to sight, smell, taste, sound. So I think that's so interesting because often children aren't going to be able to say, well, my mom stopped giving us food and the only thing left in the house was cucumbers. So when I smell cucumbers, I don't feel very good. Like a kid isn't going to be able to say that, right? So that's just an example of how something might be seriously significant to them, and yet they may not be able to vocalize that, but they may feel anxious, they may feel fear, they may feel anger all of a sudden, and we might not know why, but it could be related to something that happened to them. So we've kind of touched on this already, but for children especially, trauma is extremely impactful because of the way that it rewires the brain to function on a defense that then impairs their ability to continue to develop normally. So it's just that sometimes stages of development are impaired, or they may not come as quickly because their body is in like defense mode. And when there's repeated traumas, we call that like chronic trauma in a child's life, then their body is constantly in defense mode instead of just sometimes in defense mode. So I think that's important to remember too, because we may have a child who has extremely kind of excessive behaviors all the time, and I think that's just something we have to kind of take as maybe they are just always in defense mode, and we don't know what we're going to get because they don't know what they're going to get. I think it's just important for us to kind of remember those things too. So the reason I love talking about trauma is because God knew that we were going to live in this world, and that it was not going to be easy, and that things would happen to us, and He made our brain want to protect us. So He did all of this stuff where we would have new connections in our mind that would make an alarm go off so that we would protect ourselves. He made us like this. But also, He made us the very way that we could kind of start to be okay from those traumatic events. And the way that we do that is through connecting with other people, realizing that we're safe, that we're secure, and that we can actually attach to people. I think that's so powerful that trauma, a very, very hard thing, is actually redeemed through the very connection that we have with someone else. That makes what you guys do really important. To be a safe person, to be a safe parent, to be a safe volunteer, another safe adult. That's so important, because that is the start of rewiring the brain to say, actually, sometimes I am okay. Sometimes I am safe. It's just pretty amazing to me that God did all of that in our bodies to just help us navigate the world. So we're going to move on to the little chart that's kind of in the middle of the page. And I'm going to literally read what's on there, but I feel like this is really helpful. And it's something that I didn't necessarily really even think about, the idea that punishment is actually really different than discipline. So punishment, really the very meaning of punishment is to cause to suffer. It means using negative reinforcements. The goal is to get even or to make someone pay. It causes resentment. It teaches that force, intimidation, and revenge are acceptable. And I think I never really thought about punishment like that. And so, but it's true. When I think about the things, when I was growing up or something, when someone wanted to punish someone, it really was like an ill intent, And so, just very differently, discipline is all about teaching and training. And I think very much of the word disciple, right? That those were the people that followed the closest to Jesus in order to be like Him. So therefore, it involves modeling, giving tools, providing consequences. The goal really then is to teach instead of getting even or to pay. It's to teach them through whatever is going on. And it encourages self-examination and responsibility. And I love that because I think that's the whole point. Kids don't know until we teach them. And so really being able to give them tools to be able to look at themselves and the choices that they're making and see how it affects other people is a really important part of our role. Let's see. Just to kind of reinforce punishment, I have this last little line about it, and I'm like, this is a big ouch to me. I'm like, dang, punishment is not good. Punishment does not work because it backfires. It gives the child a negative view of self, models an unhealthy relationship pattern, provokes revenge, and maintains emotional distance. The most powerful part of this to me is the negative view of self. I really like the idea that shame is when we say, I am bad. And guilt is when what I've done is bad. So when we punish, we're kind of giving this child this perspective of shame. When we punish them, it's like, you're bad. You are making these bad choices and that makes you bad. Whereas when we kind of operate in discipline, then it's more about, I feel bad about what I've done and how that might hurt you. So I think that that's just a really interesting way of looking at it, and we can kind of see that, okay, like, we buy the discipline thing, right? But practically speaking, this is kind of easier said than done. I think initially, often, we're angry, right? When a kid does something, sometimes they're like very intentionally ugly to us. And so operating in a place of wanting to teach them is sometimes not so easy to do. So, I don't know, do you guys have any examples of like just times where maybe your reaction was anger first or something like that, and you kind of had to cool down or anything like that?
Mine usually when my children do it to the other sibling.
Yes.
Because I'm like, you cannot hurt them.
Right.
You know, and I have to step back and be like, you need to sit here for a minute and mommy needs to sit here for a minute because
Yes.
I need to talk to you about this, but I'm so upset that you hurt your sibling because that's your person, right? Like that's our
Right.
thing in our house. So that I was always, it's like a flag. I'm like, no, that's your person.
Right.
So.
I love that. I also love that you said, like, for you, that's like a flag for you. Because I
Yeah.
think, you know, differently to somebody else, it might not be as big of a deal. Something else would be. So I love that. Anything else?
Mine's when I get hit
Yeah.
and hurt, like physically.
Right.
It's because your natural reaction is
Yes.
to yell or
Be like, don't touch me.
step them back, hill sister.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And I had heard, I think, a couple of kids back, somebody told us that punishment is for the parent. That makes you
Yeah.
feel better. And
That's good.
discipline is for the kid. So
That's good.
we learned. I think we've learned that with our older kids. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's so good. I think that is, like, you know, I always hear this about parenting, that it's really what kind of helps you see that you're really actually very selfish. I think marriage does that, but then having kids does that even more, you know, and I think that is a perfect example of that. How, you know, in our response, we want to be angry because it offends us that a child would do this or whatever, but to really be like selfless in it is to teach them in the moment. And so we're kind of transitioning from this, like, kind of the theory part of all of this to the more practical stuff. But does anyone have any questions about anything we've talked about already? This is kind of a lot of information about trauma, really like boiled down to a little bitty bit. And so if this is something like maybe you're like, I'd like to know more about that, I have a ton of resources and would love to connect you with just other things. So obviously just let me know afterward, or you can reach out to me at another time too. But cool. Well, thanks for bearing with me through all of that theory stuff. So next we're going to talk about, there's a lot of stuff out there about behavior management, and one of our very favorites is Karen Purvis. She's an author and she has all of this online training and does a lot of trainings, and the reason why she's so great is because she really has this trauma lens on. She sees everything through that lens of trauma, so that because a kid has experienced trauma, they're different. Especially if it's that chronic trauma, then they are going to be seeing the world through a very different lens than maybe a child that just grew up in your home and has had a pretty normal experience. And so I love her for that, because she can kind of help us give a real practical examples of what we can do to talk to a child. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch this video. The ideal response and the ideal is on here, and she's going to talk through exactly what those things mean.
We've developed in our work an acronym to guide parents. It's the ideal response for discipline. I stands for immediate. D stands for direct. E stands for efficient. A stands for action-based, and L stands for leveled at behavior, not at the child. So, ideal. I, immediate. We know that if you respond to a child's behavior, good or negative behavior, within 3 seconds they will learn. So when the child does something good, and you say, wow, that was nice using good your words. Or that was such good show and respect. Or wow, I love it when you look at me with those beautiful blue eyes. When we do that within 3 seconds, or when a child needs to be redirected and they say something harsh and we say, well, let's try it again. If we say it immediately, we know from brain research, a child will learn. If we do it direct, we ask parents to be within 3 feet of your children. That's where I could reach out and touch my child. So direct means that when I talk to my child and I say, tell me about your day, I'm going to be my body poised towards their body and my eyes and my full attention to them. I am fully present to that child and I'm asking them to be present to me. My eyes are there for them. I might reach and touch their shoulder. That child's going to connect to me. Also, when I need to redirect a child or correct a child or even discipline a child, I might say, give me 2 hands. Now, do you want to try that with respect? I'm not going to lob words at the child. Hey, go make your bed. Hey, stop doing that. I'm going to go to the child or bring the child to myself. And I'm going to be immediate and direct. I'm going to be efficient. We have a lot of parents who are going after a mosquito with an elephant gun. So the child does something minor, and the parent overreacts or reacts too harshly. And so what we say is be efficient. And we actually use what we call levels of response. And so we have 4 levels of response. And a low-level response, the child might say, I'm not doing that. And you might say to the child, are you asking me or telling me? Oh, could I please not do that? Okay, that was good asking. So I can use playful engagement and redirect a child most of the time. And then if a child moves on into, well, I'm telling you, I'm going to do that. And I might use choices. Sweetheart, you've got 2 choices. Now, again, I'm immediate and direct. You've got 2 choices. You can either color with the pencils or color with the crayons, but you can't use the markers. If that was what the child was saying, for example. So I might use choices. Then I might use compromises. And actually, in terms of being efficient, some parents find it's counterintuitive because something that we do, a child might say, you're stupid and you're ugly and I hate you and I'm not going to the library. Or I'm not going to bed. And they've just done all this mouthy stuff. Well, they look like a pretty high challenge. I'd call that a level 3 challenge. But I might be able to meet that level 3 challenge without starting a nuclear race. I might be able to say, if you're asking for a compromise, try it again and give me good words. And the parent will say, well, why would you give that kid that was mouthy a compromise? And I would say, because my goal is to give that child voice and to connect with them and to do shared problem solving with them. So the child might go like, okay, could I please not go to the library? It's really boring. Well, sure, that was good using your words. Thanks for using those good words with me. In every case, I've been efficient. I haven't used force. I don't need force. I have relationship. So our discipline style on the ideal response is immediate, direct, efficient, action-based. We know from brain research that there's something called a sensory neuromotor loop. What it just means in common terms is, if I do the thing I heard about, I have a body memory for it. And so when a child does the wrong thing, they have a body memory for the wrong thing. And my goal as a person who wants to connect and empower my child, I want to give my child the body memory for the right thing. So when a child, if I've got something in my hand and a child grabs a pencil out of my hand, I say, whoa, stop. Put that back here, now. Now my voice may change, my demeanor will change, my words get slower. I am no nonsense about this kind of behavior. I'm not permissive about bad behavior. But I have a goal to reconnect and to guide this child to empower them. And so I say to that child, put it here, now. Now I don't take it back from them. I want them to have body memory to give it to me. So I say, here, now. And if the child resists, I might wait. I'm counting to myself because I know my children are slower to respond because their brains are different. So inside I'm going 1, 2, 3. Here, now. And so I'm slower in my voice, a little bit louder, a little bit lower in my tone, and my cadence is slowed. And the child puts that in my hand. Now I'll say, thank you. Now, do you want my pencil? If the child says yes, I'll say, give me good words and ask for it. And they'll say, Mom, can I use the pencil? Or Miss Karen, can I use the pencil? Whatever child it is. I'll say, of course you can. That was great asking. Here you go. Give me 5. Now, that child has the motor memory for doing the right thing. And now, the path that was to the right thing. Now, when we start out, and I just have to be honest, I understand with the parents, the path to the negative behavior might be a 8-lane freeway. And the path to the behavior you want might be a little machete-chopped jungle vine bridge somewhere in the dense forest. But every time my child practices with me, action-based practice with me, they chop away some more vine, and this little jungle path can also become a freeway. And the last thing in our ideal response is clearly leveled at behavior, not at the child. So when it's over, I want 3 things. I want the behavior to be changed or corrected. I want the child to be more connected to me than they were before. And I want the child to be content because they succeeded. And I know that I'll be content because I helped them.
I think one of the things I liked from Karen Purvis and that Kayla said is, and Karen Purvis, I like that discussion around it being the chopping your way through the vines and all, because, over the years working at DFACS and other places, seeing a lot of things presented like that, it's easy to get the impression of, here's this, go home and talk this way to your child the first time they act up, and it will just, you'll hear angels and everything will work out. And very often it's, it is that procedure, like Kayla kept using the phrase, it's a long game, and I agree very much. That's what you're in as a parent, as a foster parent, is a long game of caring for.
Let's talk about the more black and white side of behavior management and discipline, because I think it's always good to have a refresher. And for our volunteers, you guys might not know, this is an actual policy that all of our foster parents have to sign pretty regularly. I took this straight from Form 29, which is the Child Caregiver Safety Agreement form. And just to give y'all some background, it's a form that's signed before a foster home is open. They have to sign it annually, and it's now signed to when they get a placement that comes to their home. So there's a lot of things on this form, but I copy and pasted, so there are some typos, but they're not my typos. And this is just the section on corporal punishment. I'm just going to read it because I think it's important to talk about this too. So, corporal punishment. The DFACS policy prohibits the use of corporal or unusual punishment on a child in its custody. Children removed from their parents or other caretakers due to neglect or abuse must be disciplined in ways that do not perpetuate the physical and emotional pain experienced as a result of past inappropriate parenting practices. I think this is good. As a reminder, I think a lot of people who get into foster parenting know that you have to treat foster children differently, but I know growing up, I was spanked. I also wasn't traumatized as a child, and so that wasn't something that re-traumatized me, but we just have to remember that where these kids are coming from, and it's also important to remember we can't assume where they're coming from. We might not know a lot of what has happened to them. So then this is, I'm just gonna again read it word for word. To ensure the safety and well-being of the children placed in our home, we agree to the following: to refrain from the use of any corporal or unusual punishment on a child placed in our home, including but not limited to spanking, slapping, switching, shaking, pinching, biting, twisting, pulling, tying with rope, withholding food, force feeding, denying mail, denying appropriate contacts with family, denying contact with a worker, degrading the child or the child's family, humiliating the child, creating fear, anger, and anxiety, locking a child in a room, closet, or outside of the home, group punishment or delegating older children to administer punishment, destroying the child's property, and any other practices which may physically or emotionally damage the child. And I appreciate some of these examples because I think normally it's just like, don't spank a foster child, but there are other ways that you can abuse a child, like withholding contact from their family. I think we have a lot of kids that it may be hard for us to understand why they want to be with their parents, why they love their parents when their parents did X, Y, Z to them, but those are their parents and they want to talk to them. And if it's said that it's safe for them to do that, we should let the child do that. If they want to and they're allowed to, it's not our decision to make, and that could really continue to hurt the child. When managing children's behavior, use the suggested alternative methods or other effective methods of discipline from the foster parent manual and in consultation with the agency department. So a lot of the examples Kayla gave tonight, and for our foster parents, like asking your case manager, asking the supervisor, asking Kayla, just talking about it with other moms, I think can be helpful at times, but always seeking even DFACs. I know sometimes our workers can be frustrating, but a lot of them have a lot of good training and have a lot of experiences that can help speak to certain behaviors or certain situations. Because I think one thing that's important to remember is one thing that may work for your own child, your biological child, or your adopted child, or your other foster child might not work for this particular child in this situation, or what worked for your friend down the street might not work for your foster child. So then it says, seek ongoing information and training to build and enhance our child behavioral management skills, which is what you're all doing tonight. Immediately inform the agency or the department, so us and or DFACs, of the need for assistance in managing the behavior of any child placed in your home, and carefully review and abide by the information on discipline and behavior management in the foster parent manual. I know that all of the staff here would rather hear from you too much about if there's a behavior that's happening that you can't handle or you're having trouble with, and find out later on that you just lost it and accidentally, like, you know, bumped in, I don't know, hit your kid, I don't know. So we want to help you work through those things and figure those things out. We don't want it to come down to those to like the straw that breaks the camel's back. We want to talk with you through those things. So
in the years I was at DFACs, and I would watch this training or teach this training, I always thought somebody ought to have to do it while trying to feed like a small child peas at the same time. Because this, right, we're all here, it's, you know, Monday night, we're all ready to go home. You read this, it's like, oh yeah, cool, I get that. But it's very different from, you know, your child is just taking crayons and drawing all over the wall that you just painted over the weekend, right? That's a very different feeling to be in that moment. When we go over this, we have to do this every year with our staff and go over and we go through that list. I mean, you think through that list that Catherine just read, right? So you've got spanking, you know, slapping, switching, twisting, tying with rope, withholding food, force feeding. I guarantee you at some point in history, some foster parent has tried every one of those with a foster child, right? You don't get a list like that without just hearing, probably once or twice a year, something happens at DFACs, somebody's like, oh, we gotta redo the form, we're gonna have to add that to the list. And I just want to talk for a minute about that word unusual punishment, because for me, that can kind of be a hard road for a parent, for a foster parent. If you've not been exposed to any of Empowered to Connect and the Care and Purpose material, you're just kind of out there looking for what works, right? I mean, you get it. You've been to the training. You hear from day one. Tonight we're doing an info session in the other room, and we tell them, even at the info session, we say you can't spank foster kids. We say it from day one, but you're there. It's 10 o'clock at night. Your foster child won't go to bed. They've just, you know, poured juice all over the carpet. You are, right? All you want is something that will work. So you come up with something on the fly. Maybe that's where, you know, denying food, but maybe that's where something, I have some rope handy. I don't ever know why someone would try that, but you come up with those things and hey, it works, right? Oh, just, okay, you don't want to eat that food, you're not getting lunch. There you go. And that works, and all of a sudden the kid's face just, and as a parent or foster parent, you think, well, I have connected. Well, you have, like Kayla said, you have connected in a lot of different ways. So I want to say this to you, as a foster parent, as someone that's caring for that child, always be cautious about going outside the lines, even if it's something not on this list, where it might be, and certainly denying food is on the list. If it's, you know, we're going to do this, or we're going to have, I'm going to have my foster child do 100 push-ups because you know what? That seems to be the only thing that gets to them. It's always better, you know, we all have said the phrase, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. That's not true in foster care. It's probably not true like in most of life, actually, but it's really not true in foster care. I've seen over the years where group homes or foster parents might do things where they'd have kids dig holes, go out in the yard and dig, you know, a big hole. I'm not really sure what message that sends a child when you send them out into the yard to dig a hole. I've seen enough movies that I kind of know what image it might give me. But we just want to give you that caution of before you do something, let's use the word creative, be sure and contact, like Catherine said, reach out to your case manager and just say, hey, this seemed to be effective. Because you might be doing something that even though it's not physical, it's not corporal punishment, it's crossing over a line where the state would not be comfortable with us doing. So that's why I say if you have those creative things. Now, if you've got a kid that's got a lot of steam, they need to work off doing, you know, 10 jumping jacks, that's probably not a bad thing. 100 push-ups or, you know, 500 sit-ups, that could be getting into the realm of unusual or inappropriate. Even things, I've seen cases over the years where kids were locked in a room or locked outside. I remember the case of a young lady at her foster home. She had not gotten back. She'd been allowed to go walk around the neighborhood. She wasn't back in curfew. Well, she got locked out for 2 hours. Well, imagine a foster child that's been removed from their home, even a teenage foster child that's pushing limits, to not be in that allowed home. Think of the trauma that creates. But think of the issue then of safety. That this child, somebody drives by in the neighborhood or predator or something like that. So we just want to give a little caution there around if you're really creative around behavior management, make sure you're talking with your case manager before doing those sorts of things. We've covered, like Kayla said, a lot of theory and a lot of the philosophy of dealing with kids who experience trauma, and Catherine's covered those very black and white things. We talked about being stewards of our kids. What questions can we answer for you while we're here tonight? Either for Catherine or Kayla or I, we're together. What questions could we answer?
I have a question just
Yeah.
like on withholding food, just because
Yeah.
that gets weird.
Mhm.
Like, if they refuse to eat what you have cooked for dinner
Mm-hmm.
and want ramen noodles
Yeah.
Every night.
for every meal, is that a? I mean, is a. This is what I cooked. Eat it or
Mhm.
don't. Is
Sure.
that okay? I mean, that.
Right.
I don't think we've ever had the instance where they did need at least something.
Sure.
But I'd have thought,
Mhm.
is this withholding because I'm not cooking something extra? Or, you know, we had
Yeah.
a foster child that was just furious at me and dumped her dinner on the floor and just flipped it on the floor. And I didn't make her another plate. I fixed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I said, if you want to eat, I left your peanut butter and
Sure.
jelly sandwich in there if you want to eat later. But that gets
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, and Chloe, I think there are a lot of times can be some gray area there. I think what you did in that case, I would actually say is the perfect response. Child dumps the play of you're not feeding into that. We're not just going to keep giving you ammo to keep.
Right.
But I've provided something for you to eat, and I think too it has a lot to do with age of a child. You know, if you've got an infant that just doesn't like, you got to make sure that child has sustenance. If you've got a 16-year-old that says, I'm just not going to eat that, you know, I've provided you, you've been given something. I think generally what I see around the state, and they're looking at withholding, is just like, okay, you misbehaved today, so you don't get lunch.
Okay.
So there's
that's
no
what I
food.
thought, but I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
could
going to
this
be
get-
much more when it's done with a punishment mentality of, oh, you know, you sassed me in the car, so guess what? We're all getting pizza for dinner and you're not getting anything. Or I have actually seen an example before where a foster parent purposely cooked something the child didn't like every meal. Like, you know, not just we all like certain things,
No,
and you
we're
know,
gonna
don't like
have ramen
spaghetti.
noodles at least
Yeah.
3 times a week.
You know, but in the case I was thinking, the child didn't like, I can't remember, we'll say chicken. It was like, okay, we're going to have chicken every night for a week. Well, at that point, you're purposely trying to do something. But I think your example was great. You're tipping your dinner. I'm not going to keep allowing that. That's a discipline. That's a behavior issue. But here's a sandwich. You have sustenance. You know.
Okay.
I think that's the perfect opportunity to offer some choice. Like, you can either eat, half your plate and I'll provide you with some fruit or something, or, you can not eat any of that and you can have blankety blank, whatever you're willing to cook. I think providing maybe some choice in that could be helpful. Food, honestly, is a very, very, very triggering, trauma responsive thing, which I didn't even really know, but that's a very basic need that we have. So anytime there was ever like food withholding, or maybe they just didn't have enough food in their home, and that's something that a kid can't talk to you about. They don't even really know. Maybe it doesn't register in their mind. So it is good to have an awareness of that. And I think just providing them with something else is important too. I know, I worked primarily with teenagers in my past work with a lot of trauma, and even sitting around a table was really a challenge for some of them, because when they did it, it was not a good experience, or they had never done it. So just kind of realizing that we just don't know what this could be connected to, and just kind of having that creative kind of mind to it. But I think the intent is really important too. You're not doing that to punish them, right?
Well, yeah, you just always think okay, is this? I mean, we sign it every.
Yeah.
Okay, it's only a time. So you're thinking,
yeah.
Is this withholding if they're choosing not to eat it? It just.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our kids have free access to everything to eat all day long too. We don't really shut off anything, because some of them have been really hungry, so they can eat. But in that instance, that was I hate you and I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I'm I get you, but I'm not going to fix you.
Yeah. I think that's very much appropriate in that case. Yeah, I think the intent and the purpose, and I think so much as we've talked tonight, I think a lot of what I see in all this is, and even I think what Karen Purvis talks about, is that self-awareness of yourself, of your response. Because I've seen over the years where a lot of times a foster, and it sounds counterintuitive, but I've seen a foster child behave a certain way, knowing it's going to make the foster parent angry, because that's some small thing they can control. And it sounds weird until you see it, but it's like a child who feels totally out of control because they've been removed from their home. When they were in their home, life was not under their control. But it's that sense of, you're going to get mad at me, but I've controlled that one thing in my life. I've controlled, and I think that's one of the important things of every sort of engagement with a child, positive and if you think of discipline having to go more of a negative route, it's just being aware of not responding. Because I've seen so often where when a foster parent does have that response, Coley, like in that case, where at home, the home they were removed from, flipping a plate over might have just been an explosion. It was, you know what, you're not getting that back, but here's your sandwich. And, it goes back, all of that goes back, I think, to what Kayla said of, you redeem trauma through trauma comes from relationships, and appropriate relationships redeem it. I've seen, when the home I was removed from, this would have been the outcome of this behavior, but wow, this, you're not happy with it, but you respond in an appropriate way. Other thoughts, questions? All right. Well, that's it. I'm going to pray and dismiss us, but thank you for coming tonight. And I know, like I said, Kayla's got a lot of good resources on the papers, and then certainly she's available, and all of us are available.
Congratulations! You completed the training. Now, complete the form in the description box and wait for an email from compliance@uh4c.org.